in the context of accepting that what happened on October the 7th was utterly horrific, barbaric and despicable. Nonetheless, the toll of civilian lives and children lost now in Gaza is also, can we agree, horrific.
I think that every loss of life is a tragedy, and Israel is not interested with that. And this is why we called all the people in Gaza to make sure they can safely evacuate to the area of the south, which was much safer for them. And over 1 million people listened to the Israeli authorities, and they understood it's going to be a combat area. Israel must do that. And I want to mention another thing. Unfortunately, all the children in those beautiful areas in the south border of Israel were not given any alert to go before October 7th. Israel is giving alerts to all the people. So this is a different type of morality we're using. We are not targeting civilians. We're targeting military targets. And this is why I can guarantee you Israel works with the international law to make sure that minimize civilian casualties.
Well, as you know, there are people in the United Nations and international lawyers who think that Israel has committed war crimes, and there have been attacks in the south as well after people have moved there.
So I can tell you that people in the UN are probably, I would say, don't know how the international law works, because the only organization that is committing a clear war crimes is Hamas. Until today, we didn't hear enough from the UN, from all its NGOs, about those horrible rapes were made against young women. We didn't get to hear from all those NGOs about the war crimes Hamas committed the 7th of October. And actually, I feel that this is a moment of embarrassment to this organization, while blaming Israel that was the victim in this case. And instead of doing that, the very basic thing of sending the Red Cross, despite Hamas resistance, this is the job of the Red Cross, to get into combat areas, to make sure we know every single individual that is kept hostage by Hamas. We know how it's conditioned. I hosted a delegation of families that their dear ones, for 44 days, they know nothing about their condition. And we know that Hamas killed already some of the hostages, as we've seen Noah Marziano and Judith Weiss, that this week those names were exposed to the Israeli people, and those tragedies committed by Hamas, again, those murders committed by Hamas, they're not part of the UN's, announcements about the job of the UN.
Just staying for a moment, though, with the civilian casualties in Gaza, I know the Israeli government doesn't accept the figures that are being put out by the Hamas-controlled authorities in Gaza. I think it's now 13,500 civilian dead and 5,500 children, or something like that. But am I right on a factual basis of saying that all of those people will have Israeli ID numbers? Every single child born in Gaza has a number and has an identity. So when this is all over, we will know who died and who didn't.
Obviously, I mean, the question is not how many casualties are in Gaza, in my opinion, because obviously we're not targeting those civilians, and the reason they're dying is Hamas. Hamas is using schools, mosques, hospitals. This is a clear war crime. The fact that Hamas is using Al-Shifa hospital as its headquarters. I mean, even this fact, again, when you're looking at those people that are losing their life, it's because Hamas was preventing them physically, including shooting and firing on people so they cannot evacuate. Hamas was preventing from Israel to take infants, to take those small babies with their incubators outside. Israel even offered to bring them to Israel.
But if you look at...
Andrew, can you listen to me, please?
I've been listening to you for a long time.
No, that's trying to say, isn't it horrific that Hamas is preventing from its civilians?
It is horrific, but let me just ask you about what some of the international organisations who are there are saying. You know, the World Health Organization has described Al-Shifa hospital as a death zone. And Médecins Sans Frontières have said that Israeli soldiers had targeted patients inside the hospital.
Well, this is a clear lie. And for 3 weeks, we called to evacuate Al-Shifa hospital. We worked with our allies in the international community to make sure those patients will have alternatives. By the way, we even worked with the British government to try to create some solutions, like building a field hospital, floating hospital. There's so many solutions Israel offered to make sure the patients will be safe. But in the end, when you walk into the Shifa hospital, and just this week, we exposed those videos coming from the security video cameras of this hospital. They used it as a place to put the hostages in. We saw the grenades. We saw the rockets. What type of hospital do you think is holding grenades in order to create some medical
as you know,
supplies?
there's a great argument about the evidence for that, which I'm not going to get into because it's impossible to know from the outside, it seems to me.
But I can give you the clearance we got from the Pentagon, from the White House, all the British intelligence, because we shared it with our allies, this intelligence.
Right. Well,
no one denies the fact this is the headquarters of Hamas in terms of intelligence. They know that for sure.
Let me ask you a little bit more about how you are going to eradicate Hamas.
Yes.
Because this is clearly an organization, which is a terrorist organization, let's be clear, but which is also very, very closely connected to the population there. In other words, there are people who agree with the ideas of Hamas who are not, as it were, serving Hamas terrorists. It is very, very integrated in Gaza. How, in a million years, are you going to be able to actually eradicate that from Gaza?
I think this is a brilliant question because it addresses the problem. Many people ignore the fact that Hamas was not created one day, that as if it came from out of space. Hamas was elected in election, and the people of Gaza supported Hamas actions. You're absolutely right with your question.
And your own prime minister once said that if you want to stop a two-state solution, support Hamas.
I don't think that is what he meant. He said that the radicalism of Hamas is dangerous and is not a partner for peace. This is what he said. But going back to your question,
he's never denied it.
Do you want to go back to your question? Yeah. So the way I see it, I find a big similarity between Britain's war in Nazi Germany and the coalition that was fighting Nazi Germany, and the Marshall Plan was built after the war. You're a big fan of history. I know. I read some of your books, and the thing is that the Marshall Plan had two pillars. One pillar was economic, how to reconstruct the countries were destroyed after the war. But there was a second pillar I think people are not talking about, which is education. What type of education do children of Gaza receive? Your children, my children, go to camps. They don't train them to kill people in those camps. Unfortunately, the children of Gaza received the worst anti-Semite education in those schools were under the UN name, the UNRWA schools. So this is something must be stopped. You need to educate children for peace, not educating them to murdering Jews and glorifying terrorism.
I want to talk about anti-Semitism because, as you know, in this country, as in other countries, there has been a great rise in anti-Semitism since October the 7th, and we see it all around us. What would be your advice to British Jews who are becoming frightened of life here?
First of all, they're all my friends. I'm very much integrated in this community. My children go to a Jewish school, so I know how the community feels. And I can tell you that the community was never more afraid than under the days of those marchings in the streets of London calling for jihad. Those kind of things should concern, by the way, every British person, because anti-Semitism is not a problem of just of the Jewish community. It's a problem that starts with the Jewish community, never ends with the Jewish community. I think I also outreach to all the government seniors, like the Home Office and the Home Secretary, and I can guarantee you the government takes it seriously, but I think some attitude according to your hate crimes need to be changed, because some of the things those people are doing, like calling for intifada and calling for jihad, are clear hate crimes.
Do you accept that we are seeing the images of what is happening in Gaza since the Israeli attack, and that is driving anti-Semitism in Britain?
Absolutely not. I think anti-Semitism is an old pandemic. And in Europe, when Jews lived in Europe, there was no Gaza, there was not a Jewish state, but there was still anti-Semitism. So you cannot blame the Jews for creating anti-Semitism.
Let's talk about...
Definitely not the Jewish state.
Let's talk about the future.
Yes.
Because, as I understand it, I might be wrong, but you don't think that after what happened on October the 7th, a two-state solution is any longer possible?
It's not possible. It's not possible because, as we speak, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, refuses to condemn those horrific crimes that Hamas committed. So he doesn't even try to look like a different leader than the leaders that are in Gaza. The fact that he still pays this horrible practice of pay for slay, paying salaries for terrorists, this is horrific, and it must stop.
So if there isn't a two-state solution, what happens to the Palestinians living on the West Bank? What happens to the Palestinians living in Gaza? Who's in control of them? What kind of system is there? Do we have other Arab or Muslim states coming in to provide security there? Do the Saudis, do the Egyptians come in? does Israel try to actually run and control Gaza and the West Bank in perpetuity? What happens?
So in 2005, we left Gaza, so we had no interest controlling the people of Gaza. But the problem that created the 7th of October was the fact that Israel had zero security control on all the ammunition that the Gaza people...
So what next?
So the Prime Minister said that in order to demilitarize the Gaza Strip, Israel must have a military abilities in the Gaza Strip, like we have in many other places in the region, in order to protect our people. And I'm afraid no other country will volunteer to demilitarize the Gaza Strip. So Israel will have to finish.
So you'll
this
be
mission.
there in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time?
I think actually the time of recovery is really up to the international community, because Gaza is not just Israel's problem. We have a security problem with Gaza, but the international community must think how to create a better future also to the children of Gaza, not get this horrific education of glorifying murdering Jews, and to think about a better future to the people there, because I think after this war is finished, better opportunities will be both for Israelis and Palestinians.